Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to go ahead and continue our meeting after our lunch break. And Chief Prescott from Morehouse, you've got the stage. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. You've got a challenge to keep us all awake after that Chick-fil-A now.
I know. So I have the difficult task of coming up after lunch, so I'll try to be brief. My name is Charles Prescott. I have the distinct honor of being the Chief of Police at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I assumed that position in April of this year. Needless to say, when I assumed the position, I was met with a pleasant surprise. I inherited an undertrained, overworked police department. My inquiry of why we were in such a deficit when it came to training, because we were a private institution. This is a problem I never known in 15 years, I never knew about, that private institutions have to pay for training from the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. Speaking with other colleagues who are also chiefs of police, they didn't know this either until I brought it to the forefront. The issue we have with this at this present moment, if we look at historically black colleges and universities, this year we faced the bomb threat issue. We face the acts of violence like any other institution where we have to worry about active shooters. Morehouse College sits in the Atlanta University Center around Spelman College and with Clark Atlanta College and Morehouse School of Medicine. Those are all four private institutions that are historically black college universities. And we sit in one of the most violent pockets, if you look at the storied history of the west end of Atlanta. So to have undertrained police officers not only puts us at risk for safety, but also we're at risk for negligent training, and we're liable now for the officers we have that are protecting our investment, our community. So looking at what fees we have to pay, when we send someone to the academy, it costs us $3,093 to send someone to basic mandate. If there's another academy or another agency, that is facing the same problems we're all facing in this room when it comes to hiring, you're able to recruit because you can send your people to the academy for free. It doesn't work for a private institution. We're responsible for paying the $3,000 fee. On top of that, any other training outside of that, we talk about supervision training, we talk about any advanced training. Even when it comes to an instructor certification, so we can have an in-house instructor to train our people, we still have to pay $15 an hour for training. So if you look at the $15 an hour multiplied by 80 hours, on top of that, I have to pay for gas, I have to pay for food, I have to pay them a salary, and I have to pay for a hotel stay. It's expensive for all of us on all ends. The only request I do have at this moment, at first it was focused at just historical black colleges. On June 28th, I wrote a letter to the rector of GIPSTIC. He told me of the agencies in Georgia, over 2,000 are private institutions. Only 5 of those are historically black colleges and universities. The issue we have here and that we all have to face is that we have to be able to protect our people and our community. I was also told that because we're a private institution, we chose to have a police department. We didn't have to have one. When we look at why college police departments were created, it was to take the burden off of the municipality police departments who didn't have the manpower either to give us what we need. We look at the community policing model, it came from college police departments. We are a different police department and we police different, but we still need the same training. And we're still held to the same requirements as everyone else in the state. We still have to have 20 hours to be certified. We still have to have the governor's initiative classes to stay certified. I still have to maintain my 20 hours of executive hours to be a chief of police. We're no different than any other police department. And I understand initially when the policy was put in place in 1978 that all private institutions, EMA, fire, and 911 should have to pay that fee. I'm asking before the board that we suspend that training for all private institutions. Out of the 2,000 private institutions, only 29 that are colleges and universities. Granted, some people have bigger budgets. But on that same note, I was speaking to Chief Cheryl Elliott of Emory University on my way down here. She still, to send 10 people to mandate, is still taxing on her budget. Well, 10 for her, but it's taxing on my budget to send 2. I have an investigator that needs to go to basic investigations, but I can't afford to lose him for 40 hours a week, pay him, pay for gas in the car, feed him, and then put him in a hotel for an entire week. So from our end on the public safety end, we're still held to the same standard. We still back up Atlanta Police Department. We still back up MARTA Police Department. We back up Clark Atlanta University. We back up Morehouse School of Medicine. All of us in this pocket together. And the city of Atlanta is already experiencing another crime wave. 2 weeks ago, I had 30 cars broken into in a 30-minute span. My officers still have to be out there and about, and they still need the training everyone else receives in this county, in the state of Georgia. So it's my request that we suspend those training fees for the private institutions.
Thank you. Members of the committee, are there any questions?
Hey, a little bit off subject, but I think it would help you. So are you familiar with the Unified Campus Police Agreement? Because that was for the HBCUs that Misha Maynard carried. Okay. So that would have helped solved, passed the House, passed the Senate. It never got signed. I don't know what happened in the Senate. They messed up a lot of our stuff, so I can't speak for them. But anyway, that would help that immensely, is to put all 5, because they're all 5 in downtown Atlanta, is to have a HBCU. We're very close. It would not suspend what you're talking about specifically, but it would get y'all, all the presidents came to the Capitol to advocate for that. Like I said, we were incredibly close on getting that done, but that's going to help y'all a lot.
Yes, sir.
Victor? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Now, our next presenter is Director Michael Register with the GBI.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and other committee members for letting me have the opportunity to speak with you today. As you are aware, the GBI gave a presentation to the committee previously on September 22nd in Americus, Georgia, concerning this important issue. The intent of this brief presentation is not to rehash what was relayed at that meeting. Certainly, Agent Chestnut did a great job in presenting, but to simply give the chairman and committee members additional information that may assist them in making future decisions that may impact not only the GBI, but Georgia law enforcement overall. These decisions will not only affect each agency's ability to recruit and retain qualified, competent, and an experienced workforce, but will also impact each agency's ability to meet escalating mission demands and ensure the continued safety and stability of our communities. Let me first start by thanking each of you for the commitment you have demonstrated in addressing these critical issues by having these hearings, and also for your continued commitment to law enforcement. Every citizen in Georgia wants to have a sense of security as they go about their daily life. Also, economic development in our communities is many times tied to the effectiveness of our local and state public safety apparatus. The support you are showing makes this possible. Just as most law enforcement agencies have been impacted, the GBI has seen significant increases in many areas over the last 3 fiscal years. Some examples are as follows. The Investigations Division has increased theft investigations by 6%, assault investigations by 23%, use of force investigations by 14%, and child abuse and molestation investigations by 16%. This year, to date, the GBI has been requested to investigate 92 officer-involved shootings by the various chiefs and sheriffs that make up our great law enforcement family here in Georgia. They requested GBI because they understand the emotion and sensitivity that surrounds these events, and they seek a comprehensive and impartial agency to conduct these critical investigations. We have given our pledge to each agency and the citizens of this state that we will be professional, thorough, impartial, and be driven by the facts. Each investigation of this type averages about 195 investigative hours, which does not include the other GBI assets that may be needed to complete the investigation. The Division of Forensic Science is tasked not only with assisting our investigative division, but also the various law enforcement agencies throughout Georgia. Each year, our lab receives approximately 110,000 requests for some type of forensic action, with our overall current backlog of requests over 30 days being somewhere around 39,000. This increasing demand and backlog are the reasons the Forensic Division is constantly looking at new technologies and evaluating its processes. For example, to address the current backlog situation, we have used outsourcing for such requests as biological and chemical procedures to address this issue and service Georgia's law enforcement community in a timely manner. Though outsourcing has helped, we have found that additional personnel to meet the current and projected forensic demands would be more cost effective to the state. The medical examiner's office remains understaffed in its 3 locations, headquarters, Macon, and Pooler. The National Association of Medical Examiners accreditation stipulates that ME offices should operate with enough staff that allows individual MEs to perform 250 autopsies or less per year. The GBI's current medical examiners average approximately 343 per year because of the shortage. The GBI continues to aggressively recruit for additional MEs, but also look at innovative ways such as new technologies and a hybrid operational methodology to meet current exam demands created by certified ME shortages across the nation. I talk about these operational realities today in order to communicate the importance of the GBI having equitable industry pay and benefits. Individuals primarily join the law enforcement community based upon their want to serve their communities, their state, and their country. But they also want compensation that will provide a good quality of life for them and their families. Every state agency is recruiting from the same pool of applicants that other local and federal agencies are recruiting from. I believe that our state law enforcement agencies have great reputations and a very positive culture for personnel to work within. But the reality is this: we are competing with over 18,000 other law enforcement agencies across the United States for quality candidates. We must recognize this and ensure that the state of Georgia continues to make a commitment for competitive pay and benefits to recruit the best applicants for our state law enforcement community. As you know, there is a cost to recruitment. Each agency works tirelessly to attract, find, and recruit the best. This is a costly endeavor, but we must remember recruiting costs are nothing compared to the cost of hiring, training, equipping, and giving experience to our current personnel. This is why retention is so important and critical. Not only must we recruit, but we must retain a quality workforce. Each person that we hire at the GBI is an investment that increases in value over time because of the experience that tenure breeds. We cannot afford to lose members of our valued law enforcement community. Since FY18, the average overall attrition rate at the GBI has been 3.16%, and that excludes retirees, with individuals working 1 to 5 years making up the majority of separating personnel. This is a critical statistic and unacceptable because these are the people we have invested in so heavily to give them job-related experience and knowledge and also prepare them to become tomorrow's leaders. Each time one valued member leaves the GBI, there's a tremendous cost to replace them. You should also understand from some of the increased operational demands mentioned here today that the GBI's workforce must grow in order to address the continued increased mission demands of the agency. We must grow as the operational environment dictates, recruit aggressively to hire great ambassadors of our agency and the state, but also retain a trained workforce to meet current and future demands. I thank you for your time today, and I want to close by, giving you recommendations, considerations, or just thoughts. But certainly one is to continue to assess pay and benefits for our law enforcement community on a yearly basis. This is important because we've seen how quickly pay and benefits can fluctuate from local and state levels. And so addressing pay and benefits and then not really looking at it for another 3, 4, 5 years, it kind of puts us behind the curve, because we have found in the law enforcement community that this is a constant struggle that not only the state but local law enforcement agencies have to deal with. Agencies are finding innovative ways to attract the workforce or the candidates to them, and we have to make sure that we in Georgia stay on top of that. Continue to look for ways to professionalize and then incentivize our law enforcement workforce with educational initiatives such as tuition reduction, reimbursement programs for public safety. You know, I go back and I remember a young man, I'll just use his first name, Tim. He came to Cobb County and he loved his other agency. So why are you leaving? Well, my agency requires a college degree for promotion. I don't have one, and right now I can't afford one. I've got a couple of kids, one on the way. But I'd really like to get a formal education because it helps me and I think it helps the department. But here's a young man that was willing to, he wanted to expand and he wanted to be promoted and he wanted to rise up in his profession. But the issue was he did not have the means or the money to get an education or a degree, which another department requires. And I think that's a great thing, that departments require a degree, because we've seen how formal education helps in so many ways. And I also go back a few years when I was the chief of police at Cobb County, and we had conversations, I think, with John Carson and Senator Rhett about the possibility of working with the state institutions. If a person is in public safety in Georgia for a certain amount of time, then they'll be allowed to attend state institutions tuition free. Of course, they would still pay for books and other fees. And if they went to that institution and got a 4-year degree, then they would in turn enter into a contract to work for the state for an additional 4 to 5 years to pay that back. And if they voluntarily left, it would be prorated. And what that did is if you had a situation where a person wanted to get a college degree and they had been in Georgia law enforcement, let's say for 2 or 3 years, that was the threshold. They could apply for this program, get their 4-year degree. That brings them up to about 6 or 7 years. And now they've got to work another 4 years or so in order to pay that back fully. That brings that person into Georgia law enforcement for about 12 to 13 years. And by that time, hopefully, we would keep that person. And that was just an idea. I know that we had a long discussion on it, but I think that discussions like that have to be had because it helps professionalize law enforcement. And going back to some of the observations you made about leadership, leadership is so important because we know that every department head, a chief or a sheriff, he has got to rely on his leadership below in order to adequately lead and create a positive culture, be innovative, and address the issues externally, but also the issues internally. Examine some tax incentives pertaining to law enforcement, like retiree pay. We know that Kentucky, New Mexico, places like Baltimore have looked at tax incentives for public safety individuals, everything from property taxes to retiree pay. I know in Georgia, I think we do address ad valorem tax if you apply for the program if you're in public safety. But anything helps, and it's just another way of saying, hey, thank you for your service. We appreciate you. Talk about a healthy workforce. Develop wellness programs that ensure that our public safety personnel are functioning at their greatest physical, emotional, and mental levels possible. You know, we have peer support groups, we have other programs throughout law enforcement that helps the men and women in public safety deal with issues. But if we could give them an incentive to continue their physical well-being, because physical well-being breeds emotional and mental well-being. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Austell, Georgia. The new chief over there, Scott Hamilton, he understands this, and he has worked with the city council, and they actually pay $5 per workout up to $1,500 a year for the officers to go and work out. Now, there's certain criteria that has to be met, right? But I think that's a great program. And what he has seen with the program just in the first few weeks that he's enacted that program is that people that, some of his officers that were in poor physical condition, they're actually going to work out because it helps them financially. And he talked to a couple, and they said, hey, man, I feel great. I'm glad you implemented this program, and, hey, I do it for free now, right? But he uses that incentive to help the physical fitness of his whole department. Examine the step and grade type of sequential pay plan that many other law enforcement jurisdictions have found to be an effective retention tool. This type of program codifies a pay system into an easily understood guaranteed pay increase program from year to year if certain parameters are met. Those are just a few ideas. There's more, but I was sitting over there, you've heard a lot of the same ideas. But it's not just getting the pay to recruit, but we've got to retain. You know, from the GBI, I think we do a pretty good job of recruiting. It's the retention piece. And of course, when you look at the organization overall, two things I deal with. The need for expansion because of the mission demands, but in order to address the expansion, we've got to address recruiting, but we've also got to address retention, especially when statistics show us that we invest a lot of money into finding the right person, but so much more money into training them and giving them the experience needed, and they leave. They don't leave because they don't like the agency. I look at the exit interviews. They leave because there's a better opportunity with pay and benefits out there. And so now that's a void that we have to go back, and I think Chief Trammer talked about the cost of replacing that person. Those are just a few things, and again, I thank you for letting me be here this afternoon and speak with you, and do you have any questions of me?
Cool. All right, Clint, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Director. I really appreciate all of the comments you made, but the step and grade plan, I think, is something that's overlooked a lot of times. And for local agencies, I don't know how much we could help to affect that, but anything we could do to incentivize that, I think a lot of agencies, that's the biggest problem, especially when we're losing the 5 to 10 year employee. I know for one of the departments I work with, that was the biggest. We had starting pay raise, but you had a pay compression because, you know, they were there 5 and 6 and 7 years and making the same thing a brand new officer was making coming in. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at is the step and grade plan. I think that and retirement are the two things that will keep people in more than anything, is knowing if I stay here, here's where I'm going to be able to be here in 5, 10, 15 years. So thank you for that. And just highlighting we've had some talks in some of the Public Safety Committee hearings we've had about the backlog at the crime lab. I appreciate what y'all are trying to do there, and it's it's a very difficult task, but we want to try to help make sure that we get y'all the personnel for that too, because that's, I know so many agencies don't have the experts to be able to deal with the evidence and do the testing that needs to be done. And, you know, we're trying to help. I know y'all had a bill this year we were trying to get through to just to help protect some of your crime scene and lab scientists and give them some of the same protections from having their personal information revealed. So anything we can do to try to help y'all keep folks in that arena, I think is critically important to the state.
Yes, sir. And you know, I just had a conversation with Director Miles, Cleveland Miles, over our forensic, and he works constantly trying to figure out how we can best service our customer base, the sheriffs and the chiefs, to get that evidence turned around and get it back to them, and also with the various prosecutors across the state. And firsthand on the stepping grade, going back to Cobb County, I helped formulate the stepping grade plan up there, and I know that it impacted the workforce as far as retention there. Their stepping grade is based on 16 years, right? But that officer is able to look and see, if I'm here 5 years, this is what I should be making, and it would, cost of living, a COLA, you know, may change it, but it certainly has assisted in the retention there.
All right, Director, thank you very much for your discussion there. One question I had is, you talked a little bit about retention. Where are you losing most of your people to? And, you know, we saw in our last meeting some numbers as far as statewide average pay, starting pay, tenured pay, and that sort of thing for different organizations, including GBI. And when you lose those people, what are you seeing is the differential that they're moving for?
Well, you know, when you look at the statistics of who's leaving, of course, you know, all of the 4 divisions of the GBI, well, I won't put the legal division in there, but the other 3, we do see a retention problem with individuals coming, and it appears that if we can get them past that 5-year mark, that we're very successful in keeping them. One of the biggest areas, or most critical areas, is the forensics, right? Because these are highly trained people that took a long time to find. And now we've given them some experience, which increases their value. And unfortunately, there are companies, both government and private, that are willing to offer more in pay and benefits and other incentives that lure those people away. And I really can't, I've looked at exit interviews, I've talked to HR, and I don't think that, certainly there's probably a few, but there's a very minute population that leaves that is dissatisfied with the organization. The vast majority is leaving, seeking better opportunities, better pay, and better quality of life because of some of the other incentives that are being offered.
Are those staying in the state? Are they moving out of the state, maybe going to federal organizations or other states, or do you have a feel for that?
Well, I can't give you the specific statistics, and I can circle back around with you, but I believe it's all of the above. You know, staying in state, going to a federal organization, or actually going into the private sector. But I think it's all of the above. But I don't know the breakdown.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for coming today. I did have a question. What is the status of the education initiative that you mentioned earlier?
I think it just lost steam.
Okay.
And I don't think it was anybody's fault, you know, myself included. There's 1,000 things going on, and I think that it just, nothing stopped it. I think it just ran out of steam.
Okay. I definitely want to see if you have any, I guess, the structure of that or any work you've already done. I would love to see if I can get my hands on that. because I would love to work with you on an initiative that I was just speaking to my colleague about in reference to, especially when you're doing transfers or if you're trying to get into traditional college or tech school, colleges are already giving you credit for a lot of your law enforcement coursework. But if we can make it where upon inception of going to police academy and upon completing police academy, you come out with either a certain amount of credit hours already or your associate's degree, you automatically come out of the academy with a degree so you don't have to leave your family or try to find the funds to do it later. And B, you step back into your police department when your pay can increase automatically. So I would love to at least have that conversation, what that can look like compared to what you already are working on.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's have that conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Director, I've got, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. And the comment that I have is recently in my district, we had a triple homicide. And of course, it was tragic for the family, and the family and I were close. And your members of your team came and worked that case effectively, professionally, but were also sensitive to the emotional needs of the family. That it was late in the evening when it was discovered. And I just wanted to congratulate you for the staff that you had working that case in Sly County, and thank you. You expect a lot of different things from law enforcement. You expect professionalism, diligence in trying to solve the crime and getting the case prepared. But they were also very, very sensitive to the emotional strain of the family members, and I can't thank you enough for that attention to those members. And thank you, sir, for what you did for my people.
Well, speaking on behalf of the GBI, thank you for those comments. Man, what great people make up the GBI, and that's one of the reasons we really, really need to concentrate on that retention. We don't need those good people going somewhere else.
No.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
All right. I think next up is the Georgia Sheriff's Association. Mr. Terry Norris, the Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I said it the other day, this is a friendly crowd. You all know as much about this as we do, and we know you knew a lot of it going in. So we, and I'm sure everybody in this room agrees, that we know we're talking to people that understand. I'm going to be brief in our session this afternoon and call over some of our folks, including some sheriffs, but I've got to first make a public apology to Chief Moon. Chief Moon, if you look at the video out front, that is not me in that blue Suburban driving almost to your front door. I thought your driveway went around, and when I got to the sign that said no golf carts beyond this point, I knew I was in trouble. So if you'll kindly delete that video, I'd appreciate it. Okay, and the other thing, I will say this too, your point about retention and about the current law on training costs for people that leave and go to other agencies is a good point. Again, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank Speaker Ralston for calling upon you all, our friends, to talk about this. And I want to thank Butch Ayers and the chiefs. Y'all did an excellent job this morning presenting some very good information, and we appreciate it on behalf of the sheriffs. I have some folks with me today, and they're going to come up individually. Shelley Daniels is going to be with us. She's my clicker. Mike Mitchell's in the back. Then I've got Sheriffs Barry Babb from Fayette, Chad Nichols from Raven, Lynn Wood from Coweta, and Ross Henry from Hurd. And they're going to kind of close it out, if you don't mind. I've said this to my friends who are chiefs of police, and also to my friends who have been fortunate or unfortunate enough to ascend to the tops of the state agencies, that we're all the same. We're all hired help. Somebody hires us, we're going to do what they tell us to do. That is not the case with sheriffs. And we're here today to talk a little bit first about the office of sheriff before we get into some somewhat dated information that we collected over the past few years and updated a little bit. So in the PowerPoint, I think we skipped ahead a little bit, but as you see, there's 159, you all know that. They are established in the Constitution, and they're the primary law enforcement of the county. It doesn't mean that they are the, everybody works for them, it just means that every county has one. One thing I think that we don't miss, but somebody, others might miss, is every agency in this room has the authority to enforce the law. But if you'll skip one more screen, the sheriffs, according to the Georgia Supreme Court, have the duty to do so. And those duties, at one time, many of those duties were in the Constitution, and as a result of the revision in 1983, we moved a lot of those over to the statute side. So if you look at, next screen, if you look at that partial list of things that sheriff's offices must do, you can thank yourself, and you can thank your legislatures throughout the history of our state who have assigned these responsibilities to the office of sheriff. So sheriffs are enforcing the law. They're officers of the court, and they're keepers of the jail. And incidentally, of 142 jails today, I looked at the jail population last night, it's gone up to 38,000 and some change. And I will say this not to be critical, but I'm saying it with all sincerity. I believe this to be true. Our jail population is increasing because of criminal justice reform. A lot of the inmates a lot of people in county jails previously would have been in prison. And what happened in criminal justice reform is we wanted to help people, and we should help people. But we have put more and more people on probation. I think if you talk to Michael Nell and his crowd, it's almost an insurmountable task they have in watching folks. And there's a lot of folks on probation that shouldn't be there. So sheriffs have always said this, and I've learned a lot in the 28 years I've been with them. In fact, I think I said this to y'all before. I always wanted to be the sheriff before I came to work for them. Not anymore. But they've always said this. They believe in giving somebody a second chance, and maybe a third, but not a fourth, fifth, and sixth. And that's what we're seeing. And a lot of these people, like I said, that previously would have been in prison are now backed up in county jails. And I think Gabe will attest to this. They've got one of their policy preferences this year is to try to get the state to help reimburse the counties for the cost of these inmates that the counties get no reimbursement for. And it's a very expensive proposition. We've met with mental health professionals this week. If you look at inmate medical costs, including mental health costs, it's astronomical, and our local property taxpayers are paying for that. So a good idea was to reform our criminal justice system and give people an opportunity, but it's not always working. And that cost of that is being shifted back. So what I like to do now is call on Shelley Daniel. Shelley is in our training division. She is retired GCIC after how many years? 15 years. She's our expert on that all matters GCIC and has done a great job with us collecting information from sheriff's offices. So I think you will enjoy her short presentation. And the way we do this, we basically just survey the sheriffs. So we do different surveys. Shelley's the one that assimilates that data. So one last thing from me. I'm going to speak for Butch Ayers and myself. We are charged in our positions, and we're great colleagues, and we're so glad to have Butch. But we're charged with providing specialized training to the chiefs in his regard and to the sheriffs on our side. And we do get a little money from the state, and that comes through the course of the budget, and I think this year we might need a little more. You all right with that, Butch? Okay. Shelley Daniel.
Thank you for that introduction, Terry. Committee members, you have a copy in your packet of both the report that I'm going to go through and also a copy of the PowerPoint as we're going through it. So the report that I'm going to follow along with the PowerPoint here, we have done 3 studies at this point where we have sent out the survey to the sheriffs, and I'm going to kind of go through what our results have been. So we have been speaking on this topic since 2016. That's when we did our first survey to the sheriffs, and out of the 159, we did have 156 that responded to that initial survey. So we were trying to just get a baseline on salaries, and we also looked at some other benefit information. And then over time, we have conducted an additional 2 surveys that we have added to this report. So we conducted the first survey in 2016, like I said, looking basically at the baseline salary information. I know earlier we had a speaker that spoke about the officers having to purchase their own uniform. So part of that initial salary information we were looking at, it's not included in your report, but we actually had a county that the officer had to purchase their own duty weapon to even do that. So we started that in 2016, did the baseline, and then in 2017, then Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle started what was the COPS task force, so law enforcement compensation. And then in July of 2017, we conducted a second survey, and what we were looking at there is trying to see if, after the initial discussion started in 2016, were any of the counties able to get any sort of raise over that year period. And then we presented this report to the COPS task force, and then we recently did a third survey to kind of update this particular report. So what we looked at initially was kind of around our bordering states, and then we also included Michigan in that first survey too, to see, because they are similar in land size and population. So as you can see, for the folks in the audience that are looking at the graph that you see here, so I'm going to point to the back one here. So on the far left, you'll see that is what the salary at 2016 at that time was, and so you'll notice that it was the lowest out of our surrounding states. And then, like I said, we also added in Michigan, and then we also looked at what the national salary was at that time. So as you can see, we did, for jail officers and for deputy sheriffs, we did rank far below the national average. So I looked at this again very recently, and we also, you'll see that the national average actually went up in this 5-year time span about $10,000 for the national average. And then it kind of goes down. I looked at the same states that we looked at in 2016, and as you can see, our deputy sheriffs and jail officers still rank far below the national average, but actually all of the surrounding states to us as well. And then we also started looking at what the salary compensation, we have already heard from several speakers this morning about the retention part of this, and where are we losing our jail officers to, and to our, unfortunately, a lot of them, they are moving to within our state. So they're moving to some of the state agencies. So when that pay raise happened several years ago, we did see that we were not able to retain some of the staff that we had at that time. So this particular chart here, so this information comes from each of the websites for some of our state law enforcement officers. So as you can see the comparison there, our average starting salary for our jail officers and our deputy sheriffs, again, is far below what that is for some of our state law enforcement agencies. And then also this graph that you see here, so the map, this starts with the 2016 survey that we did initially. So what we were looking at then, like I said, I had 156 sheriffs that responded to the survey at that time, and the lowest paid deputy starting salary was $21,320, and that was in Macon County. And the highest paid deputy sheriff was $44,336, and that was in Fulton County. So again, that was the 2016 results there. When we looked again in 2017, as I mentioned earlier, we were trying to see if there was an increase. And so we had 63 sheriffs that responded to that particular survey, and they did report about 6% increase for those 63 sheriffs that responded to that one. We did another survey in December 2021, and so we had 85 sheriffs that responded to that survey, and the lowest paid starting salary then was at $13 an hour. So that is for a deputy sheriff. And then we looked at jail officer starting salary as well. So again, this is from the 2016 is what the map indicates here. So out of those 156, Again, it was Macon County that had the lowest paid starting salary for our jail officers, and that was $21,320. And then for the deputy sheriffs in Fulton County, had the highest. And then we had the increase, and then also for our jail officers, $10 an hour was the lowest paid salary. This is just in December of 2021, so hasn't even been a year yet, $10 an hour for a jail officer. We also looked at some benefit packages here, so we were trying to see what sort of benefits were being offered to deputy sheriffs and to the jail officers. So when we conducted the original survey back in 2016, as you can see, there is, for most counties, there was some sort of benefit package that was offered. And then when we did the results again in 2021, again, out of those 85 counties, then we did have almost all of them offered some sort of packaging. So I know that we have heard some of the speakers earlier today talking about some statewide benefits, so I think that is a great solution to try to offer some sort of statewide benefits for some of our officers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Mike Mitchell from the Sheriff's Association. He's going to talk a little bit about what the overall law enforcement piece looks like for the state and some of our stats that we've collected for that.
Good afternoon. Mike Mitchell, Georgia Sheriff's Association. Thank you, Shelley. I'm just going to continue on with some of the statistics that Shelley was talking about. So in 2016, as part of the initial study that Shelley was discussing, there was an effort made to try to quantify the number of certified peace officers here in the state of Georgia. And the stats are a little bit dated, but in 2016, roughly 95% of the certified law enforcement officers here in the state of Georgia were local level officers. So that would be your deputy sheriffs, county police officers, city police officers. The remaining 5% would be your state officers. Most recently, we pulled some stats for a sheriff here in the state of Georgia that was requesting to know the number of deputy sheriffs and jailers that we have, and that was 24,000 combined. Looking at that number, if you were to break that out, approximately 10,400 were deputies and approximately 13,700 were jailers. So that can give you sort of a rough idea of how many sheriff's office deputies and jailers we have here in the state of Georgia. So the number of arrests executed, as you can imagine, with the predominant number of certified law enforcement officers here in the state of Georgia being local level, it goes to reason that most of the arrests that are executed are performed by local law enforcement officers. So in 2016, 95% of those arrests were performed by local officers, and this is based on the GCIC arrest data that we were able to get from the GBI. Law enforcement line of deaths here in the state of Georgia. So this is just a breakdown of the line of duty deaths here in the state of Georgia, 2017 through 2021. And I will note that the asterisk on 2020 and 2021 just denotes that those 2 years take into account line of duty deaths related to COVID. So again, local officers being the predominant number of certified officers, those interacting with the public, as you would expect. That's a higher number of line of duty deaths here in the state of Georgia. So in all, between those years reflected there, 105 deaths, 84 were local law enforcement officers, 21 were state and federal. And then the last slide here just looks at the vacancies between 2016 and 2021. Talking a lot about salaries. One of the trickle-down effects, obviously, of salaries is being able to retain and attract qualified law enforcement officers for our sheriff's offices. So you can see here, pretty self-explanatory. We're looking at vacancies 2016 compared to 2021 for jail officers and for deputies. And in both categories, looking at full-time, we have seen an increase of about 100 vacancies for jail officers and for deputies over that period of time. And I think that is my last slide. So I'm not sure if we're going to take questions at this point. I think we're going to turn it over to our sheriffs. And I think the sheriff that we have lined up to speak is Sheriff Barry Babb from the great county of Fayette.
Tried to get Terry to let me back clean up, but I guess my own base percentage is better. So I'm going first. Lead off, lead off. Well, I know you've already been welcomed to Fayette County because I see my chief here. We got a great working relationship. We were on the phone Sunday night. Things have changed a lot in Fayette County since my first great-great-grandfather came here before the Civil War. I remember Peachtree City as a swamp, which is why we have so many lakes down here. Made a lot of liquor back in the day because of all the water. A volunteer fire station and a Gulf station just down the road here. But it's actually became an awesome city. When I tell people across the country where I'm from, I just go, have you heard of Peachtree City? Unfortunately, I can't say Fayetteville because they don't know where that is, but they'll know where Peachtree City is because then they'll say golf carts. So I know you've also heard from my vice chairman, Colonel Gibbons, and we do have a different situation, I think, than a lot of my fellow sheriffs have. I have a great working relationship with my commissioners, and he is absolutely one of them. We can easily communicate. We can easily agree and disagree, and we work together really well. And when I say that I don't have a lot of that situation, they've been very receptive. And in 2019, they gave us a really good raise to make us competitive. And they also bumped our retirement up, which still doesn't compete with what Peachtree City officers retire with, and a lot of the municipalities, but we're getting there. So in 2021, when I went back to them, this is what I said: I've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to help me stop the bleeding. See, today I'm 17 deputies short, but that's an authorized strength of 154. We are a full-service sheriff's office. So we do patrol, we work the accidents, and I know these fellows over here will tell you that it's hard to cover everything. And so we work our fatality crashes, have for years. I was actually one of the first officers in the early 90s to be sent to on scene and technical to do that, because they were stretched then, even then. So we handle everything we can handle. We work our homicides, but as Director Register had said, the crime lab needs help. Because a lot of times I can't tell parents, I can't tell victims' families what the evidence is. It's gonna take 3 months before I can tell you if it was a fentanyl overdose. I can speculate, but they do need the help. They absolutely need the help. And my fellow sheriffs across the state need our help. Unfortunately, though, when I hire a sworn officer, and I call it poaching, I'm taking somebody from somebody else, more than likely, because my salaries are good, love for them to be better, but I'm going to take somebody from somebody else. And I've had to make that call to Sheriff Henry, and people have made that call to me and said, I'm hiring this fellow right here. And it's a tough call. It is an absolute tough call. But I answer to the people in this county, and I want good people. Now, I could fill those 17 slots, y'all. I could fill it
in just a few weeks if I hired substandard people. Now, I'm wearing a little commemorative badge for us this year. All my officers are. It's a copy of Sheriff Toby Brown in 1908. We have a picture of him, and it's a star inside a badge. And I love, or a star inside of a shield. Now, I love the story behind that, and when I swear in the safety patrol officers for like People's Elementary, I love to tell them what it means. And I said, this stands for everything that's right and good. And it may only weigh a few ounces, but it's the heaviest thing any of us will ever put on. And I don't want to put it on the wrong person. I have 3 sons. 3 sons. And when I was running one election, I can't remember when it was, because it was good for them as they were growing up, because it was good for them to shake hands, look people in the eye, and sir, ma'am, different things like that. I think it was really good for them. I remember somebody asking one of them, why didn't you follow your daddy's shoes? Follow into the shoes, walk in his shoes. Why didn't you go into law enforcement? Because all 3 of my sons, I did have a firefighter paramedic. He liked to drag hoses. There's a lot of jokes we used to share. He called me a donut chaser. And I do like my donuts. I'm gonna miss Krispy Kreme on Ponce de Leon. So, which used to be my old beat when I was an Atlanta police officer. This is my 35th year in law enforcement, my 3rd term. But my son told this man this. He said, I watched what my daddy went through, and I don't want any part of it. Now, they're patriotic young men, 32 to now 28. And they love it. They love to see stories. They've seen me jump out and then be in the back seat of my patrol car and go get in a fight, and they're like, man, that's cool, you know. But they didn't want any part of it. And that's one of the things we struggle with, is recruiting the people. I've got a lot of concerns, but I can tell you my biggest concern as the sheriff when I look around my office, and really I look around this room. And by the way, I didn't think I'd ever do this in uniform, have facial hair, but I didn't want to be the sheriff that didn't tell my people, well, this is the way we always done it. After COVID, and they all want it, by the way, they even call sometimes and ask my recruiter, what's the facial hair policy? But I wound up doing it, but I see a lot of gray. When I came in, one of the questions I asked my staff to figure was, what's the age bracket of our agency? And I remember the vast majority of us were over 40. Now, when I say my concern is who am I going to turn the keys over to? Because there's not a lot of young people lining up to do this, and a lot of them come in it, y'all, and I watch it all the time, and they step away from it after just a little while. I'm afraid we may wind up a lot more like the military, and they do an enlistment. If we can hold them 5 years, we usually got them. That's how they kept me. They just kept promoting me. And every time I wanted to leave, it was like, I might need to stay a little bit longer. This is going to be a new thing. So I also know that looking back through my career and seeing it in my young men and women, is it's not a profession that with the national rhetoric that gets a lot of respect. Now here in Fayette County, I can tell you, I just left a graveside funeral, and I had several people thank me for what I did and thank me for the officers. And we get a lot of that. I can walk into roll call with my officers and I can say, who's had their lunch bought lately? And they're gonna say, well, I did the other day. It's gonna happen, because we've got a lot of appreciation here in our community. But I can tell you, when I was a beat officer in Atlanta, it was a little bit different. So when I stand up here, I'm fighting for the office of sheriff, absolutely, because I believe in it. And the reason I believe in it so much is, Chief Man, what's the life expectancy? What's the tenure average of a police chief nationally. 5 years? 3.5 years, y'all. 3.5 years. I remember when I ran in 2020, I'd had 2 terms, because I'm on my 3rd term. I realized that I had worked with 3 Peachtree City Police Chiefs, 3 City of Fayetteville Police Chiefs, 2 Tyrone Police Chiefs, and that's my municipalities that have agencies. Yes, she has tenure. She's ahead of the curve. 3 911 directors. And you know, in those agencies, that's hard for them to come in. Matter of fact, I can remember our first conversation about her coming in. I can actually control my command staff. She inherits one, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but your officers need to know that if they follow you, that you're still going to be there with them. So one of the things I see is these officers that have spouses at home, that see what happens across the country and what happens locally. Unfortunately, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Georgia 3rd in line of duty deaths last year? Behind Texas and I think we were 3rd. 2nd? That's pretty incredible. But these spouses you go home to that, and they're gonna be like, I want you to be here for the kids. And so I see a lot of officers do that, change careers. When I usually lose an officer, I usually don't lose them to another agency. I lose them to a different career. But I'm only 1 detention officer short because my salaries are pretty decent. But I can tell you those detention officers came from somewhere else. And one last thing I would tell you about is I've got officers that want to stay in the jail. And in my entire career, I haven't seen too many officers want to stay. They want they want the patrol car. They want to be able to get out in the world, actually have that freedom, but that's a whole different career, more glamorous career, I gotta say. I mean, you get to get out there because our detention officer staff, that's the unsung heroes because nobody thinks about them. But I've got officers that want to stay in there and have told me, well, this is what my wife wants me to do. So all of that said is my commissioners listened when I was bleeding because I was approaching 30 deputies. And now I'm down to 17, which is really good. Knock on wood. And I just want to let y'all know just kind of a little what I see and let y'all see that or hear about it. But if y'all have any questions for me, first of all, thank y'all for even listening to us today. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I think we're gonna wait till after our presentations before
Okay.
we ask any questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all. All right, batting second is Sheriff Nichols from Rabun County. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come talk. Mr. Anderson, he's fixed to be my rep here come January, so I was glad I was able to come so he could, I've already talked to him several times, talked to Stan Gunner, who's currently my rep now, about the issues that I've seen in our neck of the woods up there. And I am from Rabun County. We're a small rural county, 377 square miles. We have 5 lakes, 2 rivers, 1 major one that feeds all the lakes. Unique part of Rabun County, 60% of the land is owned by the U.S. Forest Service, and this is approximate, but 20% is owned by Georgia Power because all the lakes are Georgia Power made lakes. And so that leaves about 20% of the county to be for people to build on. So I guess we eventually will be limited in growth, but with the way the market has been, people have started to realize they can sell their land and get a whole lot more money now than what they could. So we're fixing to have our first, we have subdivisions, but I like to call this one a mega subdivision. We're fixing to get I've heard two different, it switches from 70-something to 90-something homes in one 20-acre spot in our county. So the growth is coming to Rabun. I contribute that a lot to do with COVID. Our internet speeds have gotten better in the mountains, so we used to be a heavily retirement community. Now we're in the second home community. Now we're your primary home community, which has led, I hate, the census was done during the year that COVID happened, because what they said our population growth is not what our population growth is. And I can kind of echo a little bit on Barry. My phone keeps locking on me, so the notes I tried to make. So that's kind of a little bit. I do have 5 cities in my county. 2 have officers at work full-time. But one of those, one of the full-time ones, the chief's working shifts. The other full-time agency, they're short 3. The other cities are supposed to have 3 officers, and they just have the chief. So I'm only short at this point 1 deputy spot, luckily, and that was because one graduated from the police academy last week. So the jail, we just did a jail expansion before COVID. We were way over capacity. So we got a splash project to add on to our jail. And hopefully I'll be able to fill the positions for our old jail, I call it, but it's going to be under the same roof, to be able to even open the jail expansion part. The commissioners, I have a decent relationship with them. I think we've learned to give and take. I am on my 2nd term as sheriff. Started out Rabun County Sheriff's Office as a jailer. At that time, we dispatched calls from the jail. Was a deputy, supervisor, then went to the city police there in my county, was a city police chief, and then come back and got elected as sheriff. So I've kind of can see probably a lot of the struggles that the cities or counties can have. I think a lot of what's been touched on is kind of this summer, because of all the influx of people, we started our own boat patrol. We were able to buy one of the DNR's old boats to kind of help them patrol, because the lakes are just running over. It actually scared me being out there, and I've lived there all my life. Fished on the lakes a good portion of my life, but it was scary out there for me being the sheriff on that lake. You would think you'd been in the ocean or something for our little lake. So we've had, like I said, that's me, chief deputies, because of the, some of the turnaround on some of the evidentiary stuff. I went to our citizens and asked for donations. I'm not scared to ask for money. That's probably why I'm here, to kind of try to get some. But we did fundraisers to raise money for patrol rifles, rifle-rated ballistic vests, cell brights for our investigators to be able to download phones, so we ain't got to take them to the GBI regional office to do it because they're so far behind. So we've tried to, I don't want to say put the pedal down when I try to, get what all I think we need to work and survive as the sheriffs up there. I think what is unique to a sheriff's office and to a sheriff is the mandates that have been talked about, every one of them unfunded mandates. So I don't know if that's an avenue that could be looked at, possibly at least for a sheriff's office, and the sheriff is maybe getting something, some funds for the mandates required of the sheriff. I think just talking to and where we're at geographically, I guess I'm getting into maybe my solutions part here. I'm trying to make it quick. But I do like to ramble quickly, so if you do not understand, please let me know if you're struggling with my country talk. So I'm positioned up. North Carolina's to my north, South Carolina's to my east, and then Towns and is to my west, and Habersham is below me. So part of the problem we have is when attracting it's hard to get from the other states. I do want to thank the Georgia Post Council for changing some of the rules to be able for another person from another state to become mandated in the state of Georgia. And we had a pretty decent raise this last year, so that piqued the interest of my North Carolina neighbors. But as soon as they found out what our benefits were in total, salaries and benefits, none of them came because they have a state retirement system up there. And also the counties, it seems, are able to offer a supplemental retirement as well, so that county did both. So the Sheriff Holland, that's my neighbor to the north, who's retiring this year at 55 years old, 29 years, and I won't tell you what he told me he would be taking home, but it was he should be able to live comfortably for the rest of his career. I've thought of that state retirement thing. That's one that could level the playing field on a certain account for some cities or counties. Some cities and counties probably would offer something better than what that system would do. You know, my wife was a school teacher for a little over 20 years before she had some health issues and had to retire. But I've often thought what a model of our teachers would look like for police officers in the state of Georgia. So I really started talking to her about those things, which, you know, they have the STEP system that was talked about here earlier. She did want me to throw in there, even though she is retired, that she thinks the STEP needs to be looked at, because once you get to year 19 or 20, you don't step no more. And she said now that she's retired, she felt like comfortable she could say that. But anyway, we are licensed by the state through Post, when we sanction through them. So, you know, if there is a way to maybe look at something like that, like teachers, I know the majority of her salary was funded from the state. The counties could provide a supplement to that, and then they had their own teacher retirement system, and they get benefits as a group. So that is, I think, all of my chatter here, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come down here to the, well, I guess below the big city. I do enjoy coming down. I am gonna have to step out or go ahead and leave. I hate to, I have to get back to teach a Citizens Academy class tonight at 6, so I need to be through Atlanta. Probably already should have been through Atlanta by now, but I appreciate the opportunity, and since I have to leave, if there's anything specifically anybody wants to ask me before I leave, you're more than welcome to. Or
Since he does have to leave, are there any questions from the committee? Thank you. Thank you very
Yes.
much for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Be safe driving north.
Yes. This is Sheriff Wood. We're all struggling today. This is Sheriff Wood from, I think, neighboring Coweta County. So I'll turn it over to him, and good to see you. All right.
Thank you, Sheriff.
I don't have a whole, I'm the neighboring county, and I have a good working relationship with Janice too, because we butt up against each other. So we have a lot of joint endeavors here. And so it works out well for us. And Barry's been a good friend to me for several years. This is my 44th year in law enforcement. I was 17 with Noonan PD, and then I've been 27 with the sheriff's office. It's my first term as sheriff. I thought it was going to be a lot easier. but I was wrong. The, I'm a lot like Barry in that my commission and my county administrator work very well with me. I have a good working relationship with them. We go to lunch and talk, so we have a lot of good conversations. They have boosted our pay probably in the past year well over 20% already, but they're at the point where they can't do anymore. And what we're here to do, what I'm here to do today, is encourage the state to try to figure out some way to help with the pay. If I can be competitive, I can usually keep them because we have a good department. We have a lot of good officers. I don't do a whole lot of recruiting myself. I do have a recruiting team that does it, but most of the time the recruiters are the officers that are working, and they're telling people how good it is, and then they're bringing the people in. We've stole some from Peachtree City. We've stole some from Hurd County. We get them from Atlanta and College Park, and for us to be able to compete with their pay makes a big difference. And we could get more if we were more competitive in pay. The benefit package, if it was statewide, I think would help a lot more in the retention. So many of the counties, because of the cost, have gone away from the pension plans, and the pension plan is what keeps people. If you have a 401k or a 457, they can take that with them wherever they go. But pension plans, usually you have to stay there to be vested, and that usually keeps them there. And that's what I would encourage the state, if they can really look at that benefit package as well as the health insurance. The health insurance goes up every year, and the counties are having a hard time funding that because of the job that we do. We are, as you heard, the line of duty deaths go up every year here. It's not, in Coweta, we have grown so fast, and we butt up against Fulton County and Douglas County and all that, Carroll County ain't as bad, but the rest of them. We get a lot of run over from those because we are a bedroom community for a lot of Atlanta. So we are working to up our game in Coweta. The county's been generous. They gave us 22 new positions last year, but I can't fill them. I'm 20 people short right now. That's jail and on the road. But we need them. And so the only thing we're finding is we've got to encourage them to come. The State Patrol helps us out a lot with accidents because we have more than our share in Coweta with all the traffic and the growth. But we are here pleading and asking for help. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you today. I'm going to be sticking around a little while longer. I left an engagement to come over here, so I'm through for the rest of the day. But I appreciate it. And now, Ross Henry, my next door neighbor from Hurd County, he is a good friend of mine. He was actually chief deputy at the sheriff's office when I was a patrolman at the city. Back in the
Thank you very much. I'm going to be very brief. I know it's been a long day. Thank you for taking time. We've been talking about salaries for many years now, and you know, something's got to give. We're in a critical situation. So thank you for having us. I know it's been a long day, and thank you for listening. Thank you for your concerns. I'm the reason you're here. I'm not as fortunate as my friends in Coweta and Fayette. When I hear $5 million for a training complex, I'm thinking that'll do my budget for 3 years. I've been the sheriff 26 years. I have never, in those 26 years, had a full staff. I've always probably 15 to 20% short. Earlier this year, I got to the point where I was almost 50% short in my staff. And when you've got 20 certified officers, that's a lot. Actually, today I was scheduled to work the courthouse, but this is the most important thing I've done in a long time. So I was able to get somebody to fill in for me. I am in a unique situation, and not in a good way. I don't know if most of you may not know where Heard County is, but we're bordered by Alabama on the west, Carroll, Coweta, and Troop. Our economic situation is not what those counties are. Our largest taxpayer, Georgia Power, this month is closing down Plant Wisely. So that's going to really affect us. I have 12,000 citizens, and when you go to Coweta or Carroll or wherever, I don't know what y'all got, 150, 160,000 land, their tax base we can't compete with. I hire people. I've got people that I've hired that are working for the GBI now, State Patrol, the DEA, the Border Patrol in Texas, and there's some more. I can hire good people, or I have in the past, but I can't keep them. I'll hire them, send them to school, and a lot of people come to me because they know the situation that I'm in, that in 6 months, if they do their job, they're probably going to go to mandate school. Or somewhere else, they may have to wait 2 years. So I send them to mandate school, they get out, they go in the field training program. In 2 years, when they become beneficial to me, they come in and say, Sheriff, I don't want to leave, but I can't afford not to. I've got a wife, I've got children, and I can make $5 more an hour driving 20 miles. And you can't fault that person. I mean, they're trying to make a living for their family, so I understand. But my citizens suffer for that, because right now, probably 60% of my employees have less than 5 years experience. I don't know, it's probably higher than that. It's probably 75%. I can think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head that have been there a while. So rural counties in Georgia are really, really struggling. And these people do the same thing that the larger counties do, just not on, just not on the amount of calls and all. We deal with the same stuff. I had a deputy shot probably 20 years ago on the Alabama line. It took 15 minutes for somebody to get to him. 15 minutes. Thank God he had his vest on and he survived. The perpetrator didn't, but if he had been in a bad situation, he would have bled out before somebody could have got to him. I wouldn't trade places with anybody. I don't want no part of Coweta Land, and I don't want no part of Fayette County. I'm an old country boy, but my folks deserve to be paid. I always look at teachers as examples. For some reason, I don't know, it keeps sticking in my head. The 2 main things in our state are public safety and education. Why can't we be on some kind of system like the teachers? If the teachers were paid like the deputies or the police officers are in the counties, what kind of education would we have? It would vary from county to county. Who could afford education? So our law enforcement need some kind of base salary or something where we can compete. If I could compete with Lynn's salary, I would never have an opening. I have people come to me. In fact, I hired a guy, and it's just because his wife makes good money, I guess. He worked for Atlanta Police Department. He was making $35 an hour. And when all this mess started in Atlanta, all these riots and protests and all that, he lives in an adjoining county. He says, I can't deal with that anymore. What can you pay me? With his experience, I was able to pay him $22, $23. He said, I'll take it. And he's still with me because he don't want to deal with that. If we can just get a competitive salary, we're fine. We're fine. So please think of a way to do this. All I hear is the surplus the state has. Well, if we've got some surplus, let's put it where it needs to go, and that's the public safety. We got an opportunity here to be a leader in our country. So let's take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the last one. Super. Good. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, all the sheriffs. Members of the committee, you leaving? Okay. Thanks, Glenn.
I would have walked out when Terry was talking.
Well, Vic, I'll put you up on, you can go first. Do you want the sheriffs to come sit up close? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you all, first of all, and I appreciate he had to leave. I appreciate Sheriff Nichols from Raven County coming up. He and I have talked a lot about kind of their unique situation up there with the lakes and working with our friends in DNR and bordering 2 states and everything. It's a little different up there, but life's a little slower up there too in most cases. So that's a good thing, but appreciate every one of you. And this is just kind of a general question, kind of like I had addressed to the director of GBI. Most of you have already said some of this is neighboring counties and that sort of thing. But what are you seeing as the differential? In other words, is it, are people leaving for 10%? Are they leaving for, is it a dollar amount? And I'm asking this out of curiosity for this committee, but also as a former county commissioner, knowing that trying to address these specific issues for Habersham County, where I live at and served for several years. What do you see as making the difference in many cases?
Well, in Coweta, my main loss, I don't lose them to other agencies usually. It's the private sector. And they're going to make $20,000-$30,000 more a year than what we can offer to pay. And they're starting off, usually it's a big corporation, like the insurance companies are hiring. I know we've lost 10 to the insurance companies in the last year or so. Delta started an aggressive hiring program, and they're taking, I know 2 just turned in their notices, they're going to Delta. So we're losing them to private sector.
Ask them if they're changing from law enforcement.
We're losing the federal law enforcement. And I can tell you that I've had guys that have gone to the federal law enforcement and called, come back in just the last few years. So they're not there happily, but they're there
Okay.
for their benefits, retirement, and pay for it.
And my situation is totally opposite. You know, my commissioners, I've never had a crossword with them in 26 years. I know they're doing the best they can. I went to them this year, I said, look, something, guys, we don't have anybody to drive a car. You know, I mean, it got that bad. So they helped me some, and it went from like $16, I can pay about $18.50 to $19. But when I get that raise, my neighbor gets a 20% raise, and it's just a vicious cycle, and we never catch up, we can't catch up, and I don't expect to pay what he does, but if it's something competitive, where somebody can make a living, a lot of them would rather be in a rural setting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for housekeeping measures, could y'all use the microphone, because we're streaming this and we're recording it as well.
And just a kind of a follow-up to that question, those people that are going to private sector jobs, are they staying in a similar type field? Do you see some going into other fields, or?
The ones that have gone to the insurance companies, they're going into their investigative field most of the time. The ones going to Delta are going into mechanics and other fields totally. So it's just wherever they can. I talked to one of them that went to an insurance company. He used to be one of our trainers. He came by the office probably 2 days ago, and I asked him how it was going. He said he hated it, but he couldn't leave. And that's the problem. We're starting a reserve program, trying to get it going now so that all these guys who's gone into private sector but want to still police a little bit can come in and work in their off time. And that's what we're trying to supplement some of our manpower with.
And if I can just add to that, the reason we do lose a lot to these new skilled labor positions, we all know there's not enough skilled labor. And I'll just be blunt and say that a good officer has horse sense, and you can teach them to do anything. And they leave us, become mechanics, plumbers, electricians, and they can make that much more money, and they don't take as much chance, I'd say, to get shot at, and they're home with their families on nights and weekends.
Okay, thank you.
Want to go back to the conversation I had with Chief Moon about the code we already have in section, but we're not enforcing. What would be the cost for poaching, for lack of whatever we can call that? What's a ballpark figure, and would that make a difference if that added to your cost? And then as a follow-up, Terry Norris, Butch Ayers, Michael Register, is that something y'all would fight us? Because if y'all are opposed to it, there's no use us doing it. Because again, I'm trying to tackle stuff that we can actually do something about.
Yeah, I'd be against poaching costs. That's how I staff my department. We have to poach. Of course, now we're getting them from, a lot of them are coming out of the north, just like Ross said. He got that Atlanta police officer. We've gotten probably 4 or 5 Atlanta PD officers in the last few years. We got 2 from College Park. So we're poaching from everywhere we can. We have started an aggressive program in the high schools because we have a co-ed high school program, and you got to figure 80% of the kids don't go to college. Mm-hmm. And so we're working with our Central Education Center, which is college, they get college credits and high school, but we're trying to get we already have it going, a law enforcement, not a degree, but a certificate program, and then we'll start training them into some of the law enforcement and interning them, and then we're going to look at recruiting that way. We're getting a lot for the jail, because the jail you can hire in at 18 years old, and you can send them straight to the jail school, which is 2 weeks long. And then they're certified jailers, and then they work for us till they turn 21, and then we can send them to the police academy. So it works out well for us.
There is a cost to poaching, a little bit anyway. A lot of agencies that know they're going to be poached from have contracts with their officers. So if the officer leaves within a certain period of time, they have to pay back the time that they were in the academy, and it can get kind of pricey now.
Plus they would lose whatever sign-on bonus they probably signed up for, I assume.
Maybe, and there was a time where, and I started hiring for Fayette County Sheriff's Office in '02 as a captain for patrol. There was a time we wouldn't pay. If they'd just say, hey, you got to stay at Riverdale PD 2 more years. Now, if I look at that candidate and they're worth it, I'll pay. Because, and we do the incentives. We offer our officers money to find new candidates. You know, you get a MasterCard gift card or something like that. So the cost really ultimately is there are feeder agencies, and they are to the north, and these officers get the experience, and I'll hire and pay for experience. So they will, our starting salary is $50,100 and something, and I will give money for experience, money for education. So a lot of them, they get that mandated service, and then if they're a good candidate, they're definitely hireable for me.
I don't have that luxury.
No questions?
Just going to mention, Bill, for Representative Werkheiser, just quickly, it's a very short code section that covers that, the cost of training. And in 2003, it was changed so that in order for a county or municipality to submit and demand payment of the hiring agency, they have to provide proof that the officer had signed an acknowledgement of the law or a employment contract. So it's very difficult to enforce, I would imagine, so.
But a lot of the departments have figured that out, and if they know they're gonna be poached, they have those contracts now. I know several of the local agencies around me have contracts, and we don't buy them out. We let them do their 2 years. It's just more experience we get.
Well, I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments, and I think the first one goes to you, Terry. And you brought up criminal justice reform,
I'm sorry.
and you brought up an increase in the jail population.
Yes, sir.
And my question is, has that correlated with the reduction in the prison population? Have we shifted from the prisons to the jails?
That is our estimation.
Gotcha. Have you,
That's been the unintended result, Mr. Chairman. We kind of knew that was to expect that, and you know, the population had been pretty constant for a little while. And I actually was surprised last night when I looked at the jail report to find that it had gone up. I was still, I guess I was a couple of months behind or more. So it went to 38 plus. And there are, as I mentioned, ACCG is going to have some interest in talking about some sort of reimbursement to the counties for the cost of these people that are technically under sentence. And we've got we get a lot of cooperation from the state, from corrections, from DJJ and community service on an individual basis. If we've got a problem and these sheriffs call me on issues with corrections or DJJ or whatever it is, we can usually resolve that situation. But systemically, it almost never changes, and it has not changed in my entire career. I mean, it just takes money, and it takes resources, and frankly, nobody said this much today. Director Rester sort of did, but you know, GSP, everybody else is having the same problems, even though their salaries on the beginning levels and really some of the upper levels are higher than most counties and cities pay. They're having their problems as well, so they can't fix everything either.
gotcha. Now, can you, for the benefit of the committee, can you shed some light on how much we do reimburse, or you don't have that information?
None.
None.
Very little. There's
Very little?
There's very little money in the budget.
Gotcha.
And that started changing probably 15 years ago. Parole has a little bit, but if we talk to Commissioner Ward, I think he'd say there's very little reimbursement that goes back now.
It goes back to the sheriffs?
Well, none of it goes to the sheriffs. It all goes to the county governing authority, theoretically, to go back to run the jails.
Gotcha. Okay. And Sheriff Henry, you mentioned something that hadn't heard before either. It was kind of I don't want to say a comparison, maybe a correlation between law enforcement and education, and you're talking teachers and law enforcement and so forth. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I don't know enough about the teachers and how they operate, but I mean, I know what their insurance is a state insurance. I don't know how their base salary is, but I assume it's statewide, or rural counties like mine couldn't afford to have the teachers, and we have one of the best education systems in the state of Georgia. We're very fortunate in that area, so I've just always wondered why law enforcement couldn't come into some kind of situation like that. I mean, there are far more teachers than there are law enforcement. It's just something that, I don't know, hit me 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, well, if that could be done, why can't it be done for law enforcement? And retirement also, just a statewide retirement. I mean, it just seems like it's something that can happen.
And Terry, let me just ask one more question is, and you just mentioned this a statewide, you know, if a teacher moves from one county to the next county, that retirement joins them, follows them, if I'm not
Yes,
correct.
sir. It does, it's portable, I mean, it's a state system, I wouldn't call it, well, it is portable, but we don't have there is no portability in in the sheriff's office retirement. And I think in some cases, Butch might know the answer to this, if you're under the municipal plan, there is you can go from one city to another possibly, that's correct, I think. But not for our people.
Gotcha. All right, and one last question, Sheriff, I think you talked to us about going down into the schools and encouraging kids could you elaborate a little bit on that? It sounds like, do you deal with the college and career academies? Tell us a little bit about the innovation that you've done.
We had just started it this past year, and that's what we're doing. We've gotten with the high schools, and our recruiters are actually going there during lunch periods and setting up a table and just encouraging them, when you graduate, come see us. You know, we're trying to get a program started where they're actually, before they graduate, they can come in and work the jail a little bit, doing different things, so that they can see if it's something they want to go into before they commit. We're doing it with the college and careers. We got an intern program with the West Georgia Technical School that's there, and they send their students, their criminal justice students, to us for internship. And we've hired actually 2 of those interns that have come through that program into the jail, and one of them just went on the road. So we are trying to get these young people that we know probably won't make it to college. And we've hired several of the football players coming out of the high schools into the jail, and it's worked out well for us.
Good. Add to that, is there a dual enrollment program associated with either criminal justice or a law enforcement academy with your technical college where they can actually get credit in high school towards a certificate?
Yes, at the CEC, the Central Education Center, it's a dual enrollment program. And when they take the law classes there, it can go toward a criminal justice degree, or they'll get their legal, I forget what it's called, but it's a certificate program through the college while they're in high school, so.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Yes, Terry, go ahead.
One final word, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned this to you, and sheriff's meeting next week, and one of the things we've been talking about is legislation, and if it pleases you and the committee, we'd like to submit something in writing in the next couple of weeks on what they said, and a lot of our ideas in here will be discussed as well. I'd also say that on Chief Moon's thoughts about poaching costs, I think maybe, Butch, we should get together and talk about that. And to answer your question, I don't think there'd be a lot of opposition. I really think we can come up with something measurable and doable. And it might not take a tremendous tweak. And we've already talked about the certification aspect. If you're leaving, post is going to suspend you until you fulfill your contract or whatever that is. So there's some things that can be done. That is a good question. So, but I think you'll hear a few things from the sheriffs, and one of them will be health insurance benefits through the state, if that's a possibility. One of them might be, and this is something we talked about years ago in 2017 when the Senate committee was looking at it, and it was the thought of doing some sort of authorizing some sort of local SPLOST type thing to generate money, fund this revenue at the local level to go into local law enforcement. And I think at the time that kind of ran out of steam simply because there's so many counties that don't have any tax-based revenue, sales tax revenue. So there needs to be something done. We want to, we're coming to you, y'all those smart people. We're coming to the smart people for help. But we will get you some recommendations or thoughts later on. Thank y'all so much again, everyone.
Terry, thank you, and Sheriff, thank you for your time. Y'all do a great job, and we're grateful that y'all made the presentation to us and enlightened us on what we need to do. And Terry, I'm looking forward to seeing that report. Thank you. All right, Department of Juvenile Justice, thank you, sir. Tyrone Oliver, Commissioner, you're up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to be here today, and thank you for accommodating the schedule to go last. I think that was by design, so I won't keep you long. I'll try to move through these slides pretty quickly, and just kind of give you a snapshot and an overview of the Department of Juvenile Justice and the population and what really goes on inside and outside the wire, so to speak, and then maybe probably touch on some of the same solutions, the same recommendations that you all heard earlier today or throughout the past two committee meetings. But first, let me give you a snapshot of the population that we're dealing with inside our secure facilities. During FY21, we had an average daily population of 918 youth. Of course, you know we run 25 secure detention facilities. We have 19 RYDCs and 6 YDCs, which is our long-term. Out of that population, 416 of those were SB 440 youth, which means they're facing adult charges. So we're seeing after, Terry talked about reform, we're seeing our most violent offenders staying with us a lot longer. So that's about 45% of our population are facing adult charges. As of today, we have a total of 1,051 youth statewide inside of our care. And again, we talked about the population, so I just wanted to just touch on the mental health aspect of things too, because I think it was touched on one of the previous presentations. I think may have been Commissioner Ward and some of the sheriffs from before. But on our youth detention centers, 50% of that population are on the mental health caseload. And our youth get screened within 2 hours of admission. And so 50% of those youth coming into our 19 centers are on our mental health caseload. 67 in our YDC, 67% in our YDC are long-term on the mental health caseload. And you kind of see the breakdown. I know I'm going pretty quickly, we're pressed on time. But this next slide here really shows the breakdown of that mental health caseload across the entire state. And I just want to draw your attention to mainly the top 3 or 4, which are the 66% of disruptive disorders or conduct disorders, acting out. Another 66% of depressive disorders, substance abuse, and then right there the hyperactive and also autism spectrum and the neurodevelopmental disorders are 48%. So we're dealing with a very difficult population inside of our 25 centers. And again, that next slide is kind of goes in a little bit more detail of the other breakdown of our mental health caseload. Now I talk about our staffing report inside of DJJ. As of FY 2022, we had a total of 480 JCO 1 and 2s hired, and we terminated 473. And I'm going to go over just some other categories outside of just security, just because I think it's really important that for this committee and everybody else to understand as well, is that it takes security to do these major functions, but also we have food service, detention counselors, and teachers, and our probation and parole specialists that are we have to provide those services. So you can see the food service workers as well. We're losing them. Our counselors, we're losing them at a higher rate, which is very alarming to us because one of our core missions to rehabilitate the youth, and that's one of the important pieces of that is our mental health professionals and our counselors. So losing more of them, and we're also losing more of our probation and parole specialists out there on the street as of FY 2022. Next slide is the breakdown by gender. It's very important. We have a lot of good staff at DJJ. Both men and women there do a phenomenal job. But if you can see the makeup of our JCO count, about 71% of our frontline JCOs are females. Overall, 66% are females, and our population are 87% males. Not saying the females can't handle their own, because they can. My wife's a cop, and she trusts me. She can handle her own. She handles me too, so don't tell her. But females, they do a phenomenal job in there. But I just wanted to give you the breakdown of what that looks like from a JCO standpoint, because I know we often get asked about our recruitment and our retention rate, and I think it was just important for you to kind of see this as well as we move over into that next slide. So overall turnover rate for that entire JCO series is at 73%. I know oftentimes you hear the 95%, the 97%, the 90% turnover rate. That's for our JCO 1 positions. That's our entry-level positions that we have. But our overall turnover rate for our JCO series are at 73%. And as of today, or this fiscal year, currently we're at 95% turnover rate for our JCO 1 and 2. So that's kind of ticked back up from the last report that I gave you. Even though our turnover rate is high, we're still holding out our vacancy rate in our JCO series of about 38%. Like to see that drop a little bit longer. So the point of that is, we can get people in. Again, it's about the retention piece. And on our graduation data, this is our graduation data from our probation staff and also our correctional staff, our JCOs. And as you can see in the fiscal years, that number is steadily declining over the last since FY17 is about a 36% reduction in our graduates. And our FY21's not up there, but we graduated actually 233 JCOs. So you can see that difference between FY20. We're just not getting, we're getting applicants to come in, but not at the rate we were in previous years. And part of that too, I think you heard from all the other presenters, is we're all in the same, fishing out of the same pond, so to speak, and trying to get those applicants coming in the door from that same pool of applicants. And here you can see where we stand as our correctional officers, as our salaries from our neighboring states. Still not where we need to be, but we're very thankful for this body and the governor's office and OPB for the increases over the last fiscal years. It really helped us stay competitive or get competitive with these other states. But just want to point out, South Carolina, they're giving out annual bonuses based off of years. So 0 to 4 years is about $2,500. 5 to 9 years is $3,000, and 10 years plus, they're giving out $4,000 like retention bonuses for their employees in South Carolina. Really quickly, our community supervision population, we currently supervise about 7,400 youth outside of the ward, inside of the communities. And they're also, you can see that breakdown right there of where those youth are. Majority of them obviously are in the community, in the neighborhoods. And they're also faced with a difficult task of going in these neighborhoods and actually making sure that youth stay safe and making sure they're fulfilling what they need to be doing as part of their probationary status. And you can see that vacancy rate there as well. Typically, we never had an issue with our vacancy rate with our probation staff. We're starting, as you can see, we're starting to see that tick back up too. It's just getting dangerous out there. I know Commissioner Nell spoke about his community staff going into these most difficult neighborhoods. And you saw the population that we're dealing with inside the wire. We also have that same population outside in the communities that the probation officers have to deal with. And so we're starting to see that the residual effect of that, of those probation officers leaving the field as well because of that, because of the demands of the job. Our HITS team, which is our high intensity probation, those are our officers who have the most difficult caseload. That vacancy rate is about that 27%. That's also uptick. And that's, again, that's very concerning just because of they have the most kids out there on probation, and they actually have that rate is actually ticking back up as well. And it never was like that before. They go through basic mandate. A lot of them do carry weapons. Some of our other probation officers, if you go back to the other slide, our JPPSs, they're like case managers. They really don't carry weapons. They're like standard probation officers. But our HITS staff, they do carry weapons and perform the functions equivalent to a community supervision officer would. That's a salary breakdown for our probation staff, for our neighboring states. You see we're really competitive. I guess that's why the turnover rate and the vacancy rate is not as high as it is on the JCO level. Plus, they have the flexibility and freedom not to work behind the wire inside the gates of a secure facility. Really quickly, I touched on our food service turnover rate. It's 80%. And currently, you know, our food service, they provide all the meals. We don't contract our meals inside of our detention centers. We have staff there who actually cook the meals and snacks and prepare those for our youth. That's at 80% turnover rate. And currently, we pay our food service workers coming in the door at $24,000 a year, roughly. That's what they're making coming in. And you can see their vacancy rate there is at 25%. Our detention counselors, their turnover rate is at 71%. Again, that's very alarming. A lot of our detention counselors, again, provide that critical care for our youth to try to rehabilitate them. We don't have that. Most of our mental health staff and our counselors are part-time because we can't afford to pay them full-time prices. We can't compete with the market out there. And the reason why you see this turnover rate so high is at 71% and the vacancy rate at 40%. Again, they're coming into our detention centers providing those services for about $36,000 a year, and you can make much more than that, you know, in the private sector or starting your own counseling service on the outside. So our recruitment efforts, our team, we're doing a very good job of trying to get our message out there as far as our recruitment retention. We're on all social media platforms. We try to put together good videos and just try to touch the people's hearts. And like, cause this job is a passion. It's, you know, everybody know what the money is coming in the door, but it's really a passion of what we want to do. We're trying to attract those people to come work for DJJ. Unfortunately, that market of people, they're not there anymore. We just can't really find the people that have the passion to do this job, want to come in and do it because it is a difficult job, and I'll just touch on that here in just a minute. So these are our biggest competitors for employment. Tractor Supply down in Eastman and Walmart down in Eastman, Shaw up in Dalton and Pilgrims. And that Buc-ee sign is ironic. I was leaving the Americas meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I stopped at Buc-ee's. You gotta stop at Buc-ee's, right? And I was getting gas, and this is sitting right there at the gas pumps, and I took a picture of it just to put in this presentation, just to kind of show where the comparison is of what the salaries are at Buc-ee's, and then, you know, it's hard to even stay competitive with all the other law enforcement agencies, but now with Buc-ee's and Tractor Supply, Walmart, and the others up there in that area, it's just that it makes it more difficult. And lastly, just touch on some of the youth on staff assaults. It's one of the reasons why, you know, partly the reason why we can't keep staff. As you heard me talk about the difficult population with the mental health caseload, that's a result of it. Didn't even touch on the gang aspect of it. But when you look at those pictures and when you talk to the staff that are inside working this job every day, I don't think there's any amount of money that you could pay them to do it. To be honest with you, but they still come back. And so you heard a lot about salaries and benefits. Yes, we do still need to be competitive with all other law enforcement agencies around us, especially in the state, but I really think a statewide system, whether it's retirement, benefits package, be competitive with everybody else. I know a lot of the people are probably going to run me out of the room, but that are left in the room. But I think we need to get out of bidding war because we're trying to outbid one another on these salaries on a local level, on a state level. And I come from a small police department. I was a police chief in Social Circle, and quite frankly, you know, I can't keep up with the Brookhavens of the world. I worked at Brookhaven too. I think that was mentioned at the last committee where they're paying officers at like $89,000 a year, about $90,000. But I really think if we really focus on what really matters, trying to have that carrot at the end of the stick, maybe with statewide retirement. I think State Patrol talked about it at the last meeting. I wasn't here for your presentation this morning, but the Florida model, I think that'll be something that's to consider because we just have to keep people in. I think you heard earlier today, none of the sheriffs, speak for GSP, probably don't have a problem with really recruiting. It's just retaining them, keeping them. And how do we do that? How do we get them in? We get them in the door, but how do we keep them? And you can see from my presentation, I can get them in the door. Maybe it's not as fast or not as many as I could back in 2017, 2018, pre-pandemic, but we can get them in. We just got to try to keep them. And part of that is the conditions that they're in. But I think if they saw that carrot at the end of that stick, they knew that they have a good retirement system, good health care benefits, that they would stay a little bit longer. You know, we did our employee engagement survey, and we survey our staff for the last couple of years. One of the main reasons why they leave, they say pay and benefits. Pay and benefits, and then also, we know, I'm not naive to the fact, we have to do a better job of treating our staff too. That was number two. Pay and benefits and safety was right there at number two, was tied with number two. And so taking all that into consideration, I think that we try to figure out what we can do to make sure that we can have that carrot and end that stick to keep our employees with us for the long term. And with that, I know I went through it pretty quick. I was trying to be respectful of the time here. I'll answer any questions.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner.
First of all, take a breath. You did a 30-minute conversation in 10 minutes. Really just comment, kudos to the governor for putting you in that position. Speaking of turnover, your position has been a tough one, and you've done an incredible job as one of the toughest positions in state government. So thank you for what you've done and the leadership that you provided.
Thank you. And I failed to mention, and as I'm taking a breath here, I do have members of the team here. My Chief of Staff, Shawana Reynolds-Cobb, CFO, Stephen Carter-Williams, our Deputy Commissioner over Treatment and Care, Margaret Kaywood here. They're the real brains behind the operation to make things happen for us. So.
Yeah, just go with it.
One real quick question from my notes here. You had mentioned about the counselors and the fact that you're trying to get, hire some of those as part-time and utilizing them as part-time. When they hire as part-time, are they actual part-time employees, or are they done as contractors?
Both. We use a combination of both. Yeah, we take whatever we can get to provide those services to the youth. Majority of them are part-time employees, and then we do have some contracted staff as well on the mental health side.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I share my committee's comments on the great job that you do and that segment of society that you have to service. I've got a question, and the question is, I think Terry Norris touched on it earlier. On the hits rate, the increase in the most dangerous, do you think that those folks are under-sentenced? Do you think that has an impact on your people?
I don't think so. I can't really say. I think, what we say after reform from a juvenile justice standpoint, that we are seeing the kids that are coming to our detention centers, they are the most violent offenders. They're, like I said, 45% of the population are SB 440 offenses. And so some of the people that we have on probation, it all depends. It really depends on the court system, to be honest with you. We have every court system runs it a little bit differently. You may have a court inside the metro Atlanta area just to say that may have a kid on probation or send them home for an aggravated assault charge, where down in rural Georgia somewhere, you wiggle a door handle or you're truant, they send them to detention. So it's all over the spectrum because of the different court systems.
Gotcha. All right. Well, again, thank you very much for the service that you provide the state of Georgia. I know you're underappreciated, but from this committee, we thank you very, very much.
And thank you. And just like I will extend the opportunity, just like Commissioner Ward did, if you all want to visit any one of the 25 facilities, just reach out to me, give me a call. I think it'll be a good idea. We did some legislative tours and tours during the pandemic that really helped out and lend some value as you're making decisions from your perspective, not only for this committee, but moving forward. So I will extend that invitation if any of you all want to come and take a look at any one of our secure facilities and community offices, for that matter.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else from the members of the committee? Well, great. Thank everyone for their presentations. Thank y'all for being here, spending the day with us. Meeting adjourned? Good.